Thank you so much for joining us on Let the Healing Begin podcast. I am your host, Asia, and today we have Hannah Duran on with us. How are you doing, Hannah?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me.
No problem. Thank you so much for joining us. I
Mhm.
appreciate you. So, whereabouts are you from?
So I'm from a small town in Ohio called Bryan, Ohio.
Okay, are you born and raised here?
Well, I was technically born in Hillsdale, Michigan, which is like really close to Northwest Ohio. So my family moved there when I was like just a little baby. So I've been like I was born in Michigan, but technically raised in Ohio.
Okay. So, let's go back to your childhood. Tell me, what was that like? Were you in, do you have siblings? Were you in a like one parent household, two parents? How was that for you?
So I grew up with my mom and my dad, and I grew up with two brothers. I have an older brother and a younger brother, and life was pretty good for the most part. We I'm first of all, I want to say I'm very blessed to have two parents. I know that isn't the norm anymore sometimes, so I do want to like thank God that I grew up in a home like that. And I know that that's a blessing. And so also, but like, my parents were just really hardworking people. My dad worked in a factory and my mom was a preschool teacher. So we didn't make a lot of money. So it's a family of five. Sometimes my mom had to work two jobs just to um, make ends meet and stuff like that. My parents were like so hardworking that they like helped me and my brothers get through sports. Like me and my two brothers played all types of sports, football, baseball, basketball, you name it. And so that cost a lot of money and we just did a lot of family stuff. I grew up in church and so we were raised in church and believed in God and went to youth group, did all those kinds of things. So yeah, like I was raised in a pretty good family for the most part. We just didn't have a lot of money, and we just did all the fun family things like play games and you like make games up and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, it was pretty decent childhood. There were like uh little things here and there like when you're a teenager,
Hmm.
you go through like insecurity, lack of confidence, those kinds of things. And when your parents don't have a lot of money and they have their own childhood trauma too, that can create some like insecurity there. And so, like I dealt with those kinds of things. And so I was pretty insecure teenager.
Hmm.
Um, I didn't have like if anybody knows anything about the ACEs score, I don't have a real high ACEs score.
Hmm.
Um, it's pretty low. So I'm very, thankful for that. I was very blessed and things like that. But just because you don't have like a high ACEs score doesn't mean you don't deal with pain and trauma and all those kinds of things. So
Absolutely.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. When I was a teenager in middle school, I had a best friend and she like there was a situation that happened but basically in a sense she kind of stopped being my friend and like nowadays teenagers will call that ghosting. She just ghosted me. Back in my day, I didn't know what to call it. There was like
Yeah.
no terminology. I was like, what happened? Like, why did she stop being my friend? And I'm like, what did I do?
Yeah.
And like now that I'm older, I'm like, that girl ghosted me, bro. I was like, wow. Like you just never like okay, also I'm old enough that back in my day, we didn't have counselors and therapists and all the things when you're in school and all of that. Like you just have like your parents and if you have any mentors or someone in the church that you can talk to, right? Um, so like I didn't have anyone talking to me about like why I was going through what I was going through and all the feelings associated with that. I was just like, I was feeling depressed. I was like, what's wrong with me?
Yeah.
Like all of that. Like it was a trauma now that I look back and think on it. And I didn't really realize why I struggled with that for so
Yeah.
long. I'm like, because she freaking ghosted me. Like, that's not healthy.
Yeah.
She didn't tell me a reason. Like, she just like dipped out and started hanging out with older people, and I mean, like, I'm totally like past all that now. So I don't know if this person
Yeah.
will ever listen to it. And so that it is what it is. But that was like it basically what happened was it hurt me to the point where I was feeling depressed and I didn't wanna make any more friends.
Yeah.
So, in high school, like, I had another friend that I was friends with at the church. So, like, I hung out with her a lot, and then I took dance classes, so I kinda hung out with those girls, and I hung out with some friends in high school here and there too. I just wasn't, like, besties with anybody.
Yeah.
And, I was also the type of person I got along with everybody. So, I was, like, cool with the athletes because I played sports, and I was cool with all the smart people because I wanted to get good grades. And then I, like, always had social work skills in me, so I was, like, cool with
Yeah.
all the people that had problems and people like me that grew up in poverty. It's like, I was just cool with people. So, but I was never, like, besties, and I actually didn't figure out till later on in life, like, that was a trauma, and it just you don't think of it like that because you think of, like, childhood abuse as a trauma, you think
Mhm.
of, like, a parental drug addiction as trauma, and all that is, for sure. But,
Yeah.
like, there's other little traumas that impact you mentally and emotionally, and you don't really realize that until you get later on in life, and you're like next thing you know, you're sitting in a therapist's office
Yep.
trying to figure out how you got there.
Absolutely. And that's the same thing with like grief. Like a lot of people think that when they hear the words grief, it's just grieving somebody that passed away. And you can grieve so many different things. You can grieve a house, you can grieve a car, you can grieve a job, like you can grieve a pet, you can grieve anything. That's like grief is about losses. So it's not just like people, it's things and places too.
Yeah, it's all sorts of stuff. There's grief everywhere, and our society doesn't really teach us to stop and handle that and process it through. They just say, "Suck it up, deal with it," which
Yep.
is I mean, in a sense, I was taught resilience. Like, my
Hmm.
my dad is like, "Suck it up, you're
Yeah.
fine," you know?
Yeah.
And I'm over here like an emo girl. Like, I'm like, "I have feelings. What
Yeah.
the heck?" And so I'm like, "Suck up my feelings," and next thing you know, like, that's why I'm, like, exploding in anger or coping, on some BS, like, doing dumb stuff.
Yeah.
Because I was taught the resilience factor, which is still very important,
Hmm.
but I wasn't necessarily taught how to process in a healthy way, and that's what I had to learn when I grew up.
That's the same thing that I said. Like growing up, we were always taught, like you said, resilience and to be strong. And like one thing that, well, a few things that my mom taught us was like, it's okay not to be okay. And it's okay to have a rough day. It's okay to be sad. But like, honestly, now that I look back, we were never taught, okay, if I get sad, how do I deal with that? If I get angry, how do I deal with that? We're always taught like anger is such a bad emotion. And it's
Mm,
not, it's not, it's just like any other emotion. And it can be healthy. It's just, what you do when you're angry, that then it begins to become, I'm sorry, unhealthy.
yeah,
Um,
our parents and their parents' generation, didn't teach them, why there's emotions and that emotions just tell us a thing about what's going on and then how the skill, in order to like deal with those emotions.
absolutely.
And and for a while I was like, why did my parents not teach me this, And I'm like, they weren't taught that, they were
Exactly.
taught the same thing. They don't
Yep.
know. So it's like I can't be mad at them. They can't teach something that they don't know. And they tried their very best to try to help us all be successful. It just, nobody's perfect. And when you're in your generation, there's always gonna be something messed up.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. I know you said that you had some insecurity going on. Like, what type of things would you be insecure of?
Oh my gosh, my weight. That was
Really?
one of the biggest things, yeah. Well, when I was about 12, I think I was like 11 or 12. I know I was like 6th grade or 7th grade. And I went to a family function
Uh huh.
and I have an aunt who is she's Asian and she is you know, like typically Asian people are a little bit smaller and thinner and things like that. And um I was not fat or bigger, overweight, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
But she called me that. She said I was fat. And I'm like, in my, you're taught to respect your elders, so don't
Yep.
talk back, right? All those things. But everything inside me wanted to punch this lady.
I know
And
it did.
then it impacted me so much throughout my teenage years, and it still does. Like, I still have to deal with those things. And then when I look back, I look at pictures and I'm like, "How dare she?" Because like, I was not fat at all. I look back at, my childhood and, like, I was actually at a pretty decent healthy weight, and, so it made me angry, and I never really got to confront her, and but anyways, those kinds of comments, and then, like, seeing, people at your school, and then things on TV, and at the time, we didn't have phones growing up, you had TV, or the internet started to become a bigger thing, and like, I've always been insecure about my body and my weight and, curves, and, even, like, one of my family members said when I was in 5th grade, this person, like, just made a comment about my breasts being bigger,
Mhm.
and I'm like, "Don't talk about my body, bro."
Yeah.
It's just it is especially to a young teenage girl, and I don't really remember all the conversations. My parents probably tried to help me in some sort of way, like, I don't really quite remember, but I don't really remember having, like, um, a lot of conversations about, like, how my body looks and how I feel about it and all those kinds of things, so that was, like, probably one of the biggest things I had to overcome is just, like, ex way that I look.
Yeah. Now let me ask you this. Like, would you ever discuss these insecurities like with your parents?
Like, did I or do I?
Did you back then?
N I don't remember. I don't think I did. I'm pretty sure I kept everything on the inside for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what? That's hard too. Like, it's so hard to be dealing with all the emotions that come with the insecurities and then not have a place to like unload that. Um
Yeah. It was yeah, that I think that was one of the biggest struggles for me was, um, not now that, like, looking back on my childhood was I didn't have a therapist or anyone to talk to. I say this all the time. I wish I had a therapist. Because I was a school social worker for about 7 years,
mhm.
and I loved that job, and I loved pouring into those kids because I wished I had had one when I was a young person. So, yeah, so, like, it's really great that we're getting so much better as a society, being able to, like, give our children and youth people to talk to like that.
Absolutely. So, like going through your teenage years with these, well, let me back up. What other did were there any other insecurities that you had, or was it mainly just like your weight and your body?
Well, also, like, my parents and I mean, they did the best that they could, but
Mhm.
we didn't grow up with a lot of money, so, um, like, this sounds so silly, but something I was insecure about, just as an example, was a lot of people that were my peers, like, I hung a lot with I hung out a lot with, like, athletes and, the smart people, like, they were all people that had parents with, like, nice jobs, had a lot of money and stuff like that, And so
Mhm.
they had like everything name brand, a lot of Nike stuff, whatever. And I just my mom and I didn't. Like we had to go shopping at Walmart and Kmart and Meijer and stuff like that. And so I was like so insecure about not having like Nike tennis shoes and Nike
Yeah.
socks and like those kinds of things. And like it might not seem like a big deal right now because like some of the thrift stores and all that kind of stuff is like coming like back into trending right now.
Mhm.
But back in the day, like if you had to go to a Goodwill or a thrift store, like you were not cool, basically.
Yeah. It was the same when I grew up. Now I go there for fun.
I know. Now I'm like, yeah, sure. And people are like, where'd you get that shirt? I'm like, I got this at Walmart. Like people are making TikToks and Instagram videos about their Walmart finds. I'm
Yeah.
like, what kind of world are we coming to?
Yeah.
This is how you know you're getting old when like champion, like that's now a thing. I was like, since when did champion get expensive? What?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they
They
still
used to make fun of kids with Champion on, and
yeah,
it's
it's
so
nuts.
crazy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
so that it was like it sounds really dumb, but like when you're an athlete and you don't have name brand stuff, it
Yeah.
like you can get made fun of or like you or just maybe you don't know if you get made fun of, but just the potential threat of being made fun of at that crucial age is a big deal.
Yeah.
So yeah, like I had to deal with like just my parents being like making a lower income, just insecure about how I looked. Also, like my parents didn't have enough money for me to get braces. So for a while my teeth, were like a something I was insecure about. And I didn't know if I was, it's really surrounded about like my looks and money. And now it's like that's like terrible that I was insecure about those things, but to the world, to the culture, it's a big deal.
Absolutely. Now let me ask you this: like, when it comes to your brothers, did you ever like did they ever have any insecurities, or is this something that just you went through? And have you guys ever discussed that stuff?
Yeah, we talked to that about that a little bit. Their insecurities were similar, I believe. Like my younger brother is like he played the center for his football team, so he's a
Mhm.
big dude, and he got made fun of for his. He actually got bullied like big time for
Wow.
like I'm like, dude, you're a center for a football team. You are protecting the quarterback and everybody else, and they're like bullying you. Are you kidding me? Like, that's how mean kids are?
Mm.
And, so, like, he got bullied for his weight, and just, you know, not having name brand things or stuff like that, like, those are the kinds of things that my me and my brothers dealt with. My younger brother also had his now it's his wife, so my sister-in-law, him and my sister-in-law had a baby when they were young. I think they were like
Okay.
18, 19. So they had a baby out of wedlock, and I know that that created some insecurity there. So they dealt with some things like that, but, um, yeah, but, like, as a family unit, though, like, we tried to stick together, love each other, go through things with each other. We're not perfect, like, we fought all the time
Yeah.
as families do. But, I think that our parents did the best that they could, and they got all 3 of us through college when they were poor, and that's a big deal, big accomplishment. I love my parents for that. Um, and, um, we but we still had to deal with trauma, and we still
Yeah.
had to deal with, like, just not being emotionally healthy, and my parents had their own kinda trauma and things that they, were either dealing with or trying to overcome themselves, really,
Yeah.
and it just all these things pass along generationally, and so we all have to overcome things, and,
Absolutely.
yeah, so just kind of like being not being emotionally aware, I think, is a trauma in itself.
Absolutely. And you know what? Like, as far as the things being passed down generations, right? I think that it keeps going until it reaches a specific person, and this person is just like, okay, enough is enough, you know. Like I didn't realize, as far as like me and my family lineage, I didn't realize how much like trauma I had been through until it came time to heal, you know, like
Oh my gosh, yeah.
because
Yeah.
it just kept coming and kept coming and kept coming. Even stuff that I forgot about, it started coming back to my memory, and I'm like, you know what? And then I had a child of my own, and I'm like, you know what? No more. Like it stops with me. You know, I'm not
Yeah.
gonna recreate that same cycle and those generational curses over and over again. You know,
Mhm.
and not that I'm perfect because I do make mistakes, and I've made some bad decisions, but you know, just keep going. You know, but
Yeah.
it gets passed down from bloodline to bloodline to bloodline, you know, and enough is enough.
Yeah, and that's really the important thing about healing is that, one, you just start it, and you just do it, and yes, you may have kids and maybe haven't made the best decisions or whatever the case may be for you, but even if you do have kids and you've made some bad decisions, you just, like, verbally saying that to them is and making them aware that this healing is important and that you're not a perfect person, that's huge because it is hard for parents to acknowledge that, and I just know for me being on the opposite end, being even an adult child, when my parents come to me and say, "We didn't make the best decisions, we messed up here and there, whatever," that, gives me freedom. And it's a lot and also it's like it's just so healing and it helps even with the forgiveness process, and just being able to move forward, just knowing that, like, even your parent is acknowledging some things and apologizing. And, because it's everyone wants to like the kids to go to the parents and apologize for their bad behavior. But what about the parents going to the kids and saying, "I apologize for my bad behavior." You have absolutely no idea the healing that you create for your child just by going to them and saying, "Mommy made a mistake and I'm sorry and I want to help you not do that." You know?
Absolutely. And then you know what else that does? Like a lot of times we have this hurt that just remains open until we get the closure that we need so that we can
Mhm.
shut it down and move on. And sometimes an apology or like just somebody owning it and saying, okay, look, I was wrong. And it's like, that's all I needed. That right there is what's going to give me the closure that I need to be able to move on and heal from that, you know?
Mhm.
And then like with the kids, it builds a stronger like trust with your children, you know, because you're
Mhm.
like, you know, because growing up, a lot of us are taught, you know, oh, you don't talk back or you don't question me or you don't, you know, and it's like we're raised with these closed mouths, you know, and so
Yes.
and like we have no voice, you know.
And there's a power and control factor when you just say, "Honor." I've been having this conversation for the third time, so it must be for some kind of reason. Because I was just having this conversation, with one of my friends, actually 2 of my friends,
Hmm.
about the Bible verse that says, "Honor your father and your mother." And that yes, absolutely, I think we should do that. Like, all of us should. We should be honoring our parents, um, as best as we can. However, there's the second part of the verse, "Don't provoke your children to anger." And so, there's both parts here. Like,
Yep.
even God in the Bible is saying, you know, to both parties, honor, respect,
Hmm.
help each other trust one another. Because what's happening in our society, in families, with friends, in marriages, relationships in general, is toxicity because we're getting away from honor, respect, love, all those kinds of things. And everybody wants to quote the first Bible verse,
Yep.
which is still true. That's why it's in there. But there's the second part to that too. And so that's why God is saying like both parties here have to do their parts. And if a child doesn't come up and say, we all know if a child does something wrong and they come up and they don't own up to it and they're still being naughty, right? It's going to create a bunch of problems. Like we know that. But
Hmm.
what about the parent too?
Absolutely. And it says in there too about parents being overly harsh on their children.
Yes.
You don't ever hear about, you just hear, like you said, about the honor your mother and your father, and then they dead the rest. But that's
Mhm.
not how it works. You can't be provoking your kids and being overly harsh. And I believe that it even says something about, I'm not even going to say that part because I don't want to quote the word wrong. I'm not even going to say that part.
But it's true, and if we like, whether somebody even agrees with the Bible or not, the concept of it is respecting and helping each other trust one another, whether it's child and parent,
Oh,
whether
that's
that's
good.
husband and wife,
Yep.
friend to friend. Like, we a part of doing that is acknowledging, owning up when you make a mistake, apologizing, being humble,
Hmm.
working through it, forgiving. I mean, so there are these, yes, these are all biblical concepts. Yes,
Hmm.
and it's a part of healthy relationships.
You know what? And it's like the foundation of a healthy relationship, and just like a really level headed and just really humble and nice, just well rounded person, right?
Yeah, and
Just,
it's a part of being emotionally healthy, emotionally aware, and this is what we can do for ourselves and for our children when we're just, like, aware of healthy relationships and how to do that.
yep, absolutely. Oh, that was some good stuff right there.
I know, I could go on all day.
Ah, okay, so let's fast forward a little bit. So, when you graduated college, well, how old were you when you got out on your own?
Oh, I think I was 21. Um, yeah, my 20s, what do we wanna say about that? It's one phrase, hot mess. We can add another word, hot mess express.
Oh man.
It was like me trying to figure out who I was,
Hmm.
what I wanted, where to go in my career, what is my purpose, all while, like, failed dating relationship after failed dating relationship, and partying, a lot of partying, a lot of coping, a lot of fun too, like, I had let me tell you what, I had a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And then it just kept going into more and more and more BS and more drama because, uh, I wasn't aware of the things I am now, and sad to say I was a social worker. I was helping people, like, just helping people in so many different ways, like, just working in multiple, just just different types of social work, I should say.
Yeah.
Um, but it wasn't until I went back to get my master's degree in 2015, and when you go get your master's degree in social work, you learn more clinical things, like how to be a therapist and stuff. So I was bringing all of this stuff to the surface, and I was learning more about mental health and all these things where I was like, "Oh, wow." I got a lot of work to do, and then in the middle of all that, I was, like, in a really unhealthy, abusive relationship too. So, um, it was like it just everything just kind of came bubbling up to the surface to where I got in just this terrible situation, and, like, just a whole entire big storm was created, and I had to, like, make a decision. Either I stay in it or I leave.
How long were you in that relationship for?
That's a great question. I say that because, I knew this person for 7 years, but we
Mhm.
were, like, on and off messing around with each other for a
Mhm.
while, and then we were officially together for 3 years. So, it was a lot of toxicity even before we lived together and were, like, officially together.
So prior to that, like, had you seen any signs of this person being like abusive, an abusive
Yeah.
individual? You had?
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and, I saw signs, yeah, just in our situationship is what I'm gonna call it because that's the truth of the
Mhm.
matter.
Yeah.
It wasn't even a friendship. It started off as a friendship, and then it turned into a situationship, and then it just evolved into dumb stuff. But,
Yeah.
oh, yeah, like, I tried to be with him even before like 2015, 2016, and like I ended up leaving him because he started being like abusive to me. And then I took him back in about like the end of 2015, and then we were officially together. But it was one of those things where I had started to um I was going to grad school and I was learning some things. I was growing up actually. And then came back in my life and I accepted that, and so I was like trying to do better. So I was like, okay, I'm on a better path. I know that I'm growing up here. So I'm like, and I try to like, set some boundaries and things like that, like tell him off rip, like, this is what's gonna happen if we're together. And of course he agreed because that's what abusers do. They
Yeah.
agree to the things until they get in there and, suck you into their suck hole. And and that's essentially what happens. Like, so I was thinking, yeah, this is gonna work this time. It's gonna be so good. It's gonna be so much better. And also people change, right? And yes, they can to a certain
Yeah.
extent, but I didn't have a good understanding of like even what that meant.
Right.
I just kind of went in there blindly, like having blind faith of like, yeah, this person can change, knowing, darn well that he didn't have any intentions of really doing that. And so that just went into just cycles of domestic violence and abuse. And I mean, I just endured all types of abuse, like uh physical abuse, financial abuse, definitely mental and emotional abuse, and some sexual abuse. So I've just endured a lot. And um finally in about 2019, I was like, uh I just came to a point where I'm like, if I am not done with him, he's gonna ruin me. Like, he's gonna ruin my career, he's gonna kill me, like something's gonna happen. And it just kept getting worse. So the summer of 2019, there was like a series of like 3 incidents that happened where I was like, okay, if I don't like I just knew it was getting closer to me leaving. And so there was one incident where he got really drunk one night and choked the heck out of me and just did all types of stuff, and I had to leave for the night. And that was like, I told myself that's the last time he's gonna put his hands around my neck. And then there was a second incident, where I was trying to remember exactly what he did. There was a second incident, where I was walking to my car and he shot my car with a BB gun and, like, shattered my window. And he was like, he could have shot me easily. And so, and I almost called the cops then, and there was something that stopped me. I have no idea what it was. It was like, why was that not enough? I don't know.
Yeah.
And then so I just told myself, okay, one more time, one more thing. If he does something, I'm like done, done. And then one morning I just got up to go to work and we were arguing about something, and he took my coffee cup out of my hands and he just like poured it all over my face, like just everywhere. And thank God it wasn't like scalding where it burned me, but he just poured it everywhere. And I was like, okay, all right. So you just mess with me and you mess with my coffee. Like, no, I'm
Yeah.
done.
Yeah.
It's like, don't mess with me or my coffee, bro.
Yeah.
And so I called the cops. They were like, you got to get a PPO because they don't do anything really about, especially like well, it wasn't the first time I had called the cops on him, but um, that's just what they do. They just tell you to go get a PPO. So I ended up doing that, got a PPO, and then after I did that, I had to think logistically, how am I gonna serve this to him? Because I have nowhere to go, and I know that, like, if I try to go somewhere like, I just knew this wasn't gonna be good if I didn't have anywhere to go. And so I held off on serving it to him, for safety reasons, trying to hold him at bay, trying to figure it, and mentally and emotionally in your mind, you have to think, like, "I gotta grieve this." like I like have to break this addiction to this person too. And that's a whole nother thing. And so, like sometimes when I think about this, I'm like, I literally am thinking like I have no idea how I did this. It had to be God. And so, but anyways, he ended up proposing to me and I said, sure, yeah, I'll think about it. And I had a plan and did I feel bad? Absolutely. I feel terrible, but that's what I had to do to survive that. I was like, "Sure, yeah, let me think about it," and then I was like and then it evolved into another story of, like, "I think we should live in separate places so we can figure this out, blah, 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 blah," and you just kinda tell people like, I knew in my head I was done with him, and I didn't tell him about the PPO until one night he just, like, came angrily into the driveway and, like, started running toward me like he was gonna run me over, and I was like, "I'm done." Called the cops, they came, they're like, "You got a PPO on him, why are you still what's happening here?" Like, they were really confused and kinda irritated, and it's like, "Dude, you don't understand." I'm like, how can I explain to this officer that I'm trying to do this safely and practically and in a smart way and trying to survive when my ex is also listening to me say this to the police officer on the front porch. You
So
know?
in that moment, that's when he found out about the PVO?
Yeah, he was and of course, he was mad, right?
Did they
And
take him to
anyways
jail?
no, he didn't go to jail at that time, they just said he had to go.
Mhm.
And so at that time though, I had found somewhere to move to, so I was like a week from moving. So as soon as he found out about the PPO that night or that next day, whatever day that was, he sends an email to my boss, like telling me all these like false allegations. And so I find out about it like a couple days later, basically. So I'm like, that goes against the PPO. That is stalking, that everything. And so I made a police report. The police report had to even go talk to my boss, which is very embarrassing.
Mhm.
And he still didn't go to jail. And I'm there, and the police came back and said, you have to take him to court. And I was like, cool. Like, thanks for doing your job. It was very frustrating. And anyway, so I did that. I was like, "I'm gonna take him to court then." And he had also been calling me from blocked numbers and trying to contact me, and I was trying to, like, record it and get evidence and all that. So I go into court, um, and essentially what happened is the judge deemed it a bad breakup. He's like, "This is just a bad breakup. I'm actually," and he actually reduced the PPO to 3 months. And I was, like, feeling the most like, I felt so hopeless. I'm like, "How could the judge even do that?" Like, this guy
Right.
tried to get me fired from my job, and, he's calling me all the time. He's completely violating the PPO. At that time, I was like, "I'm
Wow.
going no contact. I'm not doing anything, whatever." And, he just deemed it a bad breakup. So, after that, I was so discouraged. I just, like, guess gave up on the court system, basically. And then this is where, like, all hell broke loose. And so he started stalking me, like, very heavily. Like, he would drive by my house, like, 3, 4 times a day. He came and found my new house and, knocked on my door at, like, 11 o'clock at night. I looked at him, he saw me, look at him, and then he turned and walked away to his car. He just wanted me to know that he knew where I was living at. And so, like, then I ended up getting security cameras and found out he was driving by my house 3, 4 times a day. He sent me flowers to my house. He was sending me emails, leaving me threatening voicemails. He called the mother of his kids, and she said, "Hey, Hannah, like, what are you doing?" I was like, just feeding my cat at my house." She's like, "Well, he said he's gonna kill you and himself and all these things." And I'm like, so I'm freaking out. I go sit in my driveway and call the police. They're like, "We'll be there." I waited 45 minutes for the police to show up. They never showed up. So my ex starts coming down the street, so I, like, book it out of there to try to get away from him, and he chases me all through town, and I
Wow.
eventually had to, so I thought that he was gonna kill me because I had just found out, his the mother of his kids told me that he was gonna kill me and himself. So I'm thinking he's after to, he's out to kill me. And that's what stalking is. Like you're out to kill somebody.
Yeah.
So I mean, just it was constant to the point, just long story short, I made 31 police reports. And
Ooh.
so um yeah, and that wasn't in the total, that was just the total in the months I was stalked, combined. But anyway, so, I made all these police reports, and finally I had the courage to take him to court again, and I had to present, a big binder of evidence,
Mm.
and finally the judge was like, "Yeah, okay, I think you should get 30 days in jail."
That's it.
Great.
Wow.
And
Wow.
so he did 30 days. He got out. I had moved in those 30 days, by the way, which is another, by the sheer grace of God. I had moved. He gets out of jail. He continues more stalking, more contacting me through, you can download these apps on your phone that will call people from other numbers other than your own number.
Yeah.
And so he started doing all of that. I have like 200 numbers blocked on my phone. And so he started doing all that. So then I took him back to court, and then the judge gave him 45 days. So he does 45 days. He gets out. By this time, it was in January. No, it was February 2020. And he left me alone for a couple weeks. And then in yeah, so he left me alone. And then it was early March where he was driving by my second house that I had moved into.
How was
And
he finding out where you lived?
I have no idea because I had somebody look at my car to make sure there was no tracker.
Mm.
But I had later found out actually that when you go on Google, I shouldn't even be saying this. Well, I mean everybody knows it now. When you go on Google and you type in someone, if you type in your name and the city that you live in, and then you type in voter registration, your whole entire information pops up. So if you wanna vote, just know that your privacy is taken away.
Wow.
Yeah, it's bad. And, so anyways, I think that's how he found out, but so then we were gonna take him back to court in early March 2020, and then COVID hit. So in the pandemic, I'm I gotta get some food or whatever, and, just quarantine and stuff like that. So I go to the grocery store, and I get my groceries, I'm coming out, I hear someone say, "Hey, Hannah," and I turn around, and it's him. I had no idea he was even in there. And he looked at me and said, "It's not that hard to find you." And I'm just like you are, mouth wide open, deer stuck in headlights. I'm like, What?" And then he says it to me again. "It's not that hard to find you." He says that to me 3 times.
That's like a Lifetime movie.
Yeah, I know. I lived a real Lifetime movie.
That's crazy.
And so I'm at that time, I'm trying to fumble to get my phone out, and he's walking to his car, getting in his car. And by the time I got my phone out to record this, he's driving out of the parking lot. So I didn't really get good evidence. And I go to the police station, try to make a police report. Well, it's COVID. So I stayed in my car, and no police officer came out. They just called me and said, "We'll call you later to make a police report." I'm like, "Thanks for the safety." And so I had to go to the mall to get some other essential items, we'll call it that, because it was in my mind. And, so I go there, and I'm, in Dunham's, and I'm looking and, just trying to, get out of there, get myself and get out, basically. And I see him walking in the mall. So I knew he was looking for me. And I almost said to the person in front of me, it was the older gentleman, almost, asked him to, wait for me and walk me to my car because I was that scared. And I just couldn't, I was so embarrassed, and I didn't wanna get anyone else involved in my trauma. And so I didn't, and so I was like, "Okay, I'll just get my stuff, and I'll just run to my car and, like and I'll be safe." And so that's what I did. As soon as I, like, left the doors of the mall, I, like, booked it to my car. As soon as I booked it to my car, he was already in his car waiting for me to come out. Yes, and he, like, floored it, almost ran me over. I literally have no idea how he didn't run me over because I am really slow. I'm such a slow runner, it's, like, disturbing. But I have no idea how I made it, but I did, and then he, like, parks behind my car. I'm, like, starting up my car, and he comes to, like, walk around to my window. I have no idea, like, I'm just scared, like, I'm just was super scared at that time. So I, like, just book it across the mall parking lot, like, almost running people over. He's following me. He goes, like, down the road and, on a very, like, a road that has a lot of traffic, okay? And so I see him coming up from behind me. I look in my rearview mirror. He's, like, coming up behind me, and I'm on the phone with 911 at this point. And they're, like, not I mean, there's, like, no police officer in sight, like, nothing, and so I'm stopped at a red light. He's coming up, he's approaching me on the right. He stops right beside me at this stoplight. He gets out of his car, and he starts walking around to where my side was at, like, in broad daylight in the middle of traffic. Like, I just knew he was gonna kill me, and I was, like, freaking out, and then right as he was doing that, the light turns green, and I, like, book it in front of me and head to the police station, and he eventually, like, went in a different direction because he knew I was calling the police.
Wow.
And even after all of that, they didn't take him to jail. I had to call the detective on the case the next day and be like, "Look, like, something's gotta be done here." And so I,
Yeah.
like, had to advocate for myself, and he called the judge, and the judge ended up revoking his bond, and they actually ended up getting the evidence at the grocery store security camera footage, which
That's
was
good.
nice. So they took him to jail. So it was in the middle of the pandemic. I'm like, "Cool." So I'm, like, in the pandemic, off of my job, feeling safe. I was like, "Okay, like, we just gotta get through the rest of this, whatever."
Mhm.
Well, in May of 2020, I get a text message saying he got released from jail. I was like, "I cannot go through any more trauma." I am, like, maxed on my trauma level, okay? Like, I'm about to have a mentee bee for real.
Yeah.
And, um, so I told my family, like, "He's gonna kill me if I do not get out of here." So I
Mhm.
have my older brother lives in Florida, and I went and stayed down with him and his family for the summer in Florida. And, most people are like, "Wow, like, that's so cool. You got to stay in Florida for the summer." Yes and no. Like, so no, because I had to give up my cat. I had to put my cat in foster home, and that's if anyone knows me, that's like my child. And so that was really hard. I had to grieve that. And then I also wasn't able to be around my family up here in Michigan and Ohio.
Yeah.
And I was like left with this decision to actually face the trauma and the pain that I was actually going through without drinking, without coping in those ways. And so, like, I started therapy. I had already been attending a support group, which was incredibly helpful. So I continued doing that online. And I just took that summer to really dig down deep and get some roots out of me that I had, like, been dealing with for a while.
Yeah.
And I just faced it, and it was painful. It was hard, it was painful, it sucked, and, I got through it with support and therapy and things like that, and then I was able to like, halfway through of me being in Florida, I realized something. Well, a couple things. Is one, um, I realized that God was giving me a vacation, like a dream vacation. Like, people dream of being able to live a couple months in Florida and be, like, well off financially. Like, God provided so much for me in that. And, I was at the beach one day, and, I was with my brother and my nephew, who was 5 at the time, and my brother was, talking to me about how good my nephew is in swimming, and he really is. He's awesome. Like, he swims at his grandma's pool down there, like, all the time. He's a really good swimmer. But
Mhm.
my brother was saying, like, even like, in these waves, like, he still wanted to be there and make sure the waves didn't take him under. And I felt like God was saying in that moment, "Hannah, that's what I'm doing for you.
Mm.
I am like your heavenly Father who is not gonna let these waves take you under and drown you."
Yeah.
And I was like, because I knew, like, waves represented grief and pain and trauma and all these things, and I'm like, "Okay, Lord, thank you." Like, it was like a father talking to his
Aw.
daughter, like, giving me that reassurance, like, I'm not gonna die, he's not gonna leave me hanging, you know? And
Mhm.
I was like, "Okay, we can get through this." Like, I might have to swim, I might have to surf the waves, I might have to, like, flail my arms for a minute, but
Yeah.
he's not gonna let me go under. And so once I gained that and more healing and things like that, I just gained the strength and confidence to be able to come back and came back in the fall of 2020 and had to go through the court process. Eventually my ex pled guilty to his crimes of stalking, and in December 2020 he was finally sentenced to 17 months of aggravated stalking.
Wow.
And even, like, that's a crazy story too of, like, the day that I had to do my victim impact statement, he was sentenced, it was all on Zoom. And the judge sentenced him to 17 months in prison on Zoom and then said, "You have till 8 o'clock tonight to turn yourself in." And I was like, a part of me was like, "Yes, I got some victory, I got some justice." And then I thought about it, I'm like, "He's not gonna turn himself in." And I was right, he didn't. He was gone, and I was, like, really freaking out, panicking, and couldn't even go to work. I mean, like, I thought he was coming for me.
Yeah.
And finally, after working with the police station and all of that, like, 5 days later, they were actually well, he had actually went to turn himself into the jail, and the jail turned him away.
Wow.
And so that was wild, and then eventually the police had to catch him, and he still never received any more time for him, like, being on the run, but he did end up going to prison, and I was able to really heal more after that.
Yeah.
And so that alone was, like, it's incredible. Like, I only say this because not for me, like, I don't wanna give myself any glory in this. This is totally God,
Mhm.
because it's incredible that I'm even here because I found out throughout my journey that 76% of femicide victims were stalked before being murdered. So that's like 3 out of 4 women that were murdered were stalked.
Yep.
And so the fact that I was stalked and didn't die is like I was one of the 4 women that survived.
Wow.
And, like, I'm just so incredibly thankful to God that he got me through that, and not only did he get me through that and I survived it, and he healed me through that, and I had to put in the work as well to heal.
Yep.
And then he gave me so much purpose out of that. And
Yeah.
that's why I speak out so much about my story and all the things that I learned about healing and all of that because God literally saved my life, literally and figuratively. And I got so much closer to God. Like,
Mhm.
him and I are on way better terms than what I was in my 20s. And I learned the meaning of what it means to trust in God. Man,
Ooh.
and
It's not easy. It's challenging. It's a lifestyle. Just like healing is a lifestyle. Like
mhm,
it's a day by day, daily intentional decision to walk in this healed version. And like as far as trusting God, man, when I say that's probably one of the hardest things that God has ever asked me to do, but he makes it so easy because he shows me that he's trustworthy. He's not
yes,
just got you out here on a flim. Oh, trust me, and then I don't show up. He's not like us. When I say us, I mean man, like, people, humans. But if he's asking to like for us to trust him, he has a good reason why, because he's definitely trustworthy. And he's revealed his true character to me
mhm.
as well. And so he makes it that much easier.
Yeah, I
Trusting.
remember I remember, like, even before I went to Florida, I prayed the prayer, and I tell people all the time, "Be careful when you pray this." I said, okay, so one of the things is, like, after dealing with just men in general in my life, and especially my, most recent ex, I was like, "Lord, I don't trust anybody. Like, you're gonna have to help me learn how to trust again because where my trust factor is like crap, okay?" So I'm
Mm,
like, "Lord, teach me how to trust you." That was my prayer.
mhm.
And then he's like, sometimes God answers your prayers in unique, uncomfortable, ridiculous ways. So what does he do? Lets my ex get out of jail again. I was like, that really wasn't that wasn't the way I was thinking. But here we are. And he's like, I want you to go to Florida. Like, trust me when you're down here, whatever, whatever. And if I never did that, if I never trusted him to go down there and like receive all the revelation and healing that I got, I would not even be here at
Mhm.
all.
Let me
So,
ask you this. What is so say if it's somebody out there, right? Because there's plenty of women that are suffering from abuse and stalking and stuff like that. So what if we have somebody that's listening that's going through the same thing and just does not know how to get out or is they're feeling like they'll never get out or what would you say to that person?
um, I would say that one, uh, you're not alone because there are many women that have been in that, and I've been in that myself. And two, I think there's a lot of things, first of all, but I just what something that's coming up for me right now was I prayed to God. I was like, God, if like help me get out of this, give me people that will understand what I'm going through to help me get out. Because I felt isolated and I felt like nobody was going to understand me. I felt like nobody would even understand from a faith perspective because I was thinking in my mind, like, aren't a lot of Christian people that understand domestic violence and abuse and all those things, and I love God, and I'm, in this domestic violence relationship, and I didn't know how to navigate that or whatever, and so I remembered praying that, and God gave me those people, and then also, like, just, like, praying for strength and courage, and then just, the other thing that's coming up for me is learning, educate yourself. Even if you're in it right now, uh, like, one thing I learned was about narcissistic abuse. Because I'm a social worker and I'm a nerd and all of that, I was like, this isn't the right thing to do, but, I was trying to diagnose him. I was like, "Is he a narcissist? Does he got bipolar disorder? Like, is he a schizo? Like, I don't like, what is this dude?" And, like, what I'm just being honest.
Yeah.
And I was trying to figure it out, but while I was trying to figure that out, I was learning, and I was
Yeah.
getting educated, and I was seeking out information to understand why I was experiencing this, why he was like that,
Mhm.
and then it eventually turned into empowerment. It empowered me to say, "Oh, well, if let's just say he's a narcissist. Okay, what do I gotta do? Boundaries, boundaries, boundaries." And, I was like just figuring out, I was just learning and then reaching out for help in whatever way. And it's hard when you're in those situations because a lot of women are isolated, men too, but like anyone in that situation feels very isolated. But that's why try to speak out about it. And when I talk with people, I say, look, I don't care if this is your 200th time trying to get out. Like, I will still listen to you wherever you're at because
Yeah.
it's hard getting out of those. It becomes an addiction. Your brain gets used to the cycle of domestic violence and abuse. And you let them hook you back in because you wanna be loved and so it just like there's trauma bonding, you gotta when you understand all these things,
Mm.
it starts to make sense to you, and then you can figure out, "Okay, here's the cycle, I know what the cycle is, now we have to figure out how to break it."
Yeah.
And I would say also, let the pain and the anger motivate you to get out. because I was pissed.
Yeah.
I was like, this is the last time that he's gonna put his hands around me, period. And
Yeah.
then like a week after I had so I want to tell this story too, just because it's good and it's honest and vulnerable and there's a lot to it. But like a week after I had moved out of my first home and I had the PPO on him,
Uh-huh.
I was, he was blocked. He was still calling me. I wasn't answering because I'm like abiding by the PPO. And then I found out he had cheated on me and who he had cheated on me with. And like this person was like, please don't bring up my name. I don't want to be in any drama. And I was like, no, I got you. I got you. And then one day my ex calls me and he says, hey, what are you doing? I said, I don't know. Why don't you ask? And I said the
So
girl's name. I was like, why don't you ask her? And he was like, what are you talking about? And I was like, you know what I'm talking about, right? And just like sparked a whole entire argument. And and so he's going on and I'm going on and I'm saying like really mean, horrible things. I'm like, I should have let my dad hurt you and beat you up. And I mean, I was just saying all these things. And that's just the G rated G version, by the way.
yeah.
And and anyways, and so he got me so worked up into this
Mhm.
like whole entire like anxiety panic attack. I just all I remember is hanging up on him and I like threw my phone across the floor and I'm crying and I'm like just sitting there on my floor and I'm like and I had this moment and I thought, Hannah, you moved out, got a whole entire PPO on this dude, and you're still in. I said, "I'm the problem, like, part of the
Mm.
problem." I was like,
Wow.
"The part of the problem is me." I literally said that to myself, "Hannah, you are part of this problem. You have to stop." And so that anger even towards myself in that moment, I just allowed that. Yeah, it was painful, but I allowed that to help motivate me to go no contact. Because I didn't wanna be angry with myself, and, like, and also I worked with kids, and I would tell them all the time, "Are you gonna part of the problem or part of the solution?" Like, I
Right.
would constantly preach that, and
Yeah.
then I'm, like, sitting here having this moment with me, "Hannah, are you being a part of the problem or part of the solution?" And
Right.
I'm like, "Well."
Yeah.
I was like, "I'm being part of the problem." So, I just, like what I would tell anyone else, like, "Go to therapy, get a support group, get some help," like, whatever. I said, "Hannah, you have to do this.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you're gonna continue the cycle." So
Yeah.
you have to, like, even though it's painful, people wanna like, a part of our brains are designed to avoid pain, like, period.
Yeah.
And so, like, when you know that, then you start saying, "Okay, well, I know my brain wants to avoid pain to survive,
Yeah.
and then that means, like, I have to figure out how to use this pain in a good way to help me heal." So, like, people don't understand, like, pain can actually be a motivator. Pain helps change us. And if you just
Yeah.
allow your pain to help change you and heal you instead of break you down and, kill you and destroy you,
Yeah.
then that can, your life can be so much better.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think and I know it doesn't feel good, but we learn the most valuable lessons and we learn the most about ourselves when we're in that hurt place or when we have to go through stuff. Because if we're comfortable all the time, like, what are we going to learn? How are we going to grow? Um,
Exactly.
so I'm sorry. What are you doing now?
So right now I do a couple things. I work for an organization called SOAR. It's short for She Overcomes and Rises. And it's an organization that helps women recover from addiction, trafficking, incarceration, abuse, sexual trauma, all of those kinds of things. And I absolutely enjoy this work. I love working specifically with women and just because I relate to them and like have so many experiences like that. And so I'm doing that. And then I'm also so I I called it an organization, Healing in the Waves, which is now shifted more into doing, like, just, podcasting, like, empowerment, awareness, those kinds of things.
Hmm.
And, so, like, I have my podcast called Healing with Hannah, which is on YouTube. And, and then I also, created a film, a documentary about my story that I just told you. It's the more lengthier version is on YouTube. So if you want to know the details on that, that's on YouTube. So I've just been doing a lot of awareness and talking about revelations and speaking life into people and just taking all the lessons I've learned in my own journey in my own life and just pouring that into other people. And that is the last part of your healing process is now helping other people. So I enjoy
Absolutely.
doing what I do.
Absolutely. You know, once we get through stuff and go through the healing, and I'm not gonna say go through the healing like it's one and done because it's an everyday thing, but like it's only right to turn around and go get the other people. You know, it's only right because like the fact that you're on this side of things and you see how good life is so much more rich, like in the
Mhm.
healed version, you know. And so it's
Yeah,
only right to turn around and go get the people that are still stuck or, you know, whatever the
absolutely.
situation is. So I'm grateful for you telling your story and just everything that you're doing. I appreciate that.
Thank you for giving me an opportunity. That's why I love share it's weird because when I first started my journey of talking about my trauma, I was oh my gosh, I was such a hot mess. I would just be crying and crying, couldn't stop
Oh,
crying, and, like, now I'm to a point where I enjoy telling people all my crap
yeah.
because I want people to know, like, they're not alone. We all go through stuff, like and we can get through it and heal, and like you said, come on the other side, like I'm coming through the other side right now, and I'm like, "Wow," like, now I have such an appreciation and, a gratefulness for the process and the journey and how God has helped me through all not just God, but people who loved me through that.
Hmm.
And so, if you just get people who like, God will always be there for you and love you, and He can give you people to be with you on the journey too,
Yep.
and that right there is absolutely priceless.
Yep. And you know, it's a quote that I heard a while ago, but it still sticks with me. Where it says like appreciate the journey. The more you appreciate the journey, the more the destination will make sense or something like that.
Yeah. Oh, it's huge, yeah, that's because that's what it is. It's not about the destination, it's not about getting there, it's actually about every moment that's here,
Yep.
every day that comes, and I tell you what, when you get people that care about you and love you, and then you start noticing your progress and how better you're becoming,
Hmm.
it's like wow. It's just, an amazing feeling because I tell you what, I've been, like, in my 20s, I didn't go to God that much,
Hmm.
and I thought I had people, and those people are still nice people, but they weren't, um, the type of people that were, like, supporting me getting through it in a healthy way and
Yep.
things like that. And when you get those healthy people that are gonna, like, be in the pit with you,
Hmm.
oh my gosh, if you get people like that, you are the most blessed person. You can be in the most messed up situation.
Yep.
You can be in the biggest pit of your life. When you get people that are willing to get down in the dirt with you and be in that pit, you are the most blessed person. Yeah,
Absolutely.
period.
Because you don't find many people like that. You know, sometimes
No.
when stuff starts to get hectic, people like, this is too much for me. I'm out, you know? And then you're left there picking up the pieces by yourself and doing it alone, you
Mhm.
know?
This is
And
why when you heal, you gotta be one of those people that are willing to get in the pit with
yep,
other people.
yep.
Yeah.
And that's why we have to remain humble, you know what I'm saying? Because oftentimes like people can become healed and then step into this new life and forget where you come from. But it's like, no, please don't. That's the one reason why I journal every single day, you know, every single day, or I might miss a day here and there, but for the most part, like I have journals from the last few years, you know, when I started becoming intentional with God. To where like I can look back and see, because as we make these baby steps, and that's another thing about God, he doesn't just dump all this progress on us at once. It might feel like we're stagnant or like we're not doing much, or, oh, I keep taking 5 steps to get knocked back down 10, but when you look at
Mhm.
this, how far you come, you're like, wow, I have grown. I'm succeeding. I'm just better.
Yeah, it's kinda cool to see, like, I wasn't even talking like this, like, 3 years and 2 years ago.
Me too.
I mean, people like, they're I bet if people hear this and they know me, they're gonna be like, "Is that Hannah?" Like, she was literally, like, partying, taking 7 shots of Ciroc or tequila, like, 7 years ago. Is this
Yeah.
Hannah, like, talking about Jesus and stuff? Like,
Me,
we
me
were
and you
just
both.
jamming out to, like, Lil Jon, shot, shot, shot. Like, I was you know,
Yeah.
I was actually jamming out to it and doing it. And now I'm like talking about like getting in the pit with people and
Yep.
how God loves us. And it's
But
just
you know
so
what?
funny.
That's what it takes, because I did a whole lot of drinking, drugging, promiscuous, like all that stuff. I did that. And so
Yep.
it's like, man, and I'm just thankful to God, like he didn't let me die in that space, or
For
he
real.
didn't take his hand off me. He was even there with me while, and protecting me even while I was a hot mess.
Yeah. Like, okay, so one of the jobs that I do from time to time with SOAR is we have a jail support group.
Hmm.
And I love going to jail. That's what I tell people all the time. I love going to jail. It's my favorite. Why? Because
Yeah.
like I always tell people this. Like I've told you my childhood. It was, like there were some things, but like I had a pretty good childhood for the most part. And I say even with all of that, and in my 20s doing really dumb things, I was always one step away from that.
Hmm.
Like, I never want to take for granted that I never ended up in jail.
Yeah.
I never ever want to think like that, and so I love going and serving those ladies because I don't ever want yeah, okay, you made a messed up choice, like, as we all like, I just didn't get caught in mine.
Yeah.
I could have easily ended up there,
Hmm.
and, and so I love serving those women. I love serving women that feel ashamed, messed up, like, crazy, whatever, like, I just love doing that because I was that woman, and I needed people to help me get out of that, and, so I just always tell people all the time, I could have easily been in jail, like, so just I love to remain humble and
Hmm.
just remember that we are all one step away from ending, just making a terrible choice.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for sharing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it.
So I got one last question for you. If people want to work with you outside of this here, how can they find you?
So, you can find me on Instagram and Facebook. You can find me with you can find me on Instagram and Facebook at Healing in the Waves. I'm also on YouTube. I have a Healing in the Waves YouTube channel, and in there I have my Healing with Hannah podcast. And yeah, and I also my email is healinginthewaves@gmail.com. And so if people want to contact me, for whatever reason, I also do some coaching on the side. So like I help women trying to get out or leave situations or just heal in general from any of their trauma. And so yeah, I'm willing to do that as well. So if anybody is interested, they can feel free to contact me.
Okay, thank you so much. Well, thank you everyone for joining us here on Let the Healing Begin podcast. Please don't forget to head over to www.greatergrowthllc.com and support the t-shirt and hoodie store there. And then also head on over to amazon.com and purchase a copy of Back in My Day by Asia Wilson. And until next time.